Welcome back to the arena, obviously, and it's Michael Corrin, and as you just saw, it's the Friday Rumble, and my golly, we've got a good one this week, I hope. Tarek Fatah is an author, a broadcaster, a journalist, and a man who doesn't suffer fools lightly. Well, thank goodness for that, because Anthony Furey is no fuel or fool. He's a regular Sun News host and contributor, major columnist and editor at the Sun newspaper group, and as Tarek suggested a few moments ago, Furey and Fatah.
I know that. Sounds nice, eh?
I said Fury first. Do you know why? Because he's white.
Of course, he has privilege.
Exactly. White privilege. Do you want to start arguing about that again, you two? White
well,
privilege?
he's half my age, and yet he has equal representation. That gives him white privilege.
You want me to get half a chair? You want me to, lower the chair in half?
I have a walking stick over
Okay.
He's got a walking stick.
Yeah. Cane.
Threat taken.
Yeah. Okay.
On the racism issue, though, seriously, in northern Nigeria, thousands of people have been slaughtered. It's almost beyond comprehension because they don't have the technology of the Nazis or the Soviets. So this is just random slaughtering, cutting and shooting. I mean, it's so vile. We have given far more attention to what happened in Paris. Now, I think this is understandable in context. We can so identify it could happen to us. So Paris is us, and also the attack on free speech. But there are people saying, I'm sorry, Africans are being slaughtered in their hundreds and thousands, limited media coverage, blanket coverage of tragic, of course, but a very small number of people, relatively speaking, in France.
The reason I think is that the Nigerians have not spoken out about it. The worst for me was that on the same day, the same Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula killed 45 people in Yemen in a car bomb explosion. It wasn't even covered. The same AQAP hits Paris, kills 12, takes over the news. The 45 who died in Yemen were not there. Now, again, the point is that the Yemenis are not on the street talking about. And as much as it can be argued that the European aspect of the news finds resonance with people in Canada or the West,
yep.
But the challenge to face that is, where are the Nigerians? Not even the Nigerians in Toronto have come out.
Well, how large a community is that?
I can tell you at least 1,000.
Not that many.
But there better be 10 who are upset at this.
Well, I'm sure they are.
Where are they? Because I've reached out to a few of them. It's the same case with the Darfuris. There are at least 1,000 Darfuris in this city. They had a genocide, but they couldn't arrange anything until non-Nigerian groups, church groups like Kairos got up.
Okay.
And
Is it about race, or is it about simple, I don't know, self-protection, self-identity and empathy?
Yeah, I think it's about the latter. And also technology, Michael. Our media outlets have less people stationed in Africa than in Western Europe, for instance. Just the number of Reuters correspondents, for instance. The other technology is that there are far more people tweeting and Flickr snapping and so forth that these are happening, so you get things going viral a lot more easier. Also, of course, the fact that we, regardless of geography, we identify with what happens in a stable, established, liberal capitalist democracy far more than we do in a number of places in Africa. And the bad news is we come to expect these news stories coming from those parts of the world far more than we do expect them coming from Paris.
I think that's a very valid point. You've used the phrase the racism of lowered expectations, but it's also just fatigue. There are so many. I mean, I remember when I was writing the book about Islam's persecution of Christianity, it just went on and on, particularly in northern Nigeria. Almost every day there were attacks, dozens dying.
The other aspect, just look at today. We've had demonstrations in Pakistan and a couple of other places, Turkey, and they're covered. But the demonstrations in Niger, where church has been burned and a French cultural center has been torched, is not really in the news. I think the point is we somehow are conditioned to expect Africans to behave in this way. The whole genocide of Darfur, South Sudan, nobody covers it. Congo, about 10 million people dead. The worst of all atrocities has been committed in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We have simply shrugged it away. We don't even know how many Congos there are today.
Well, and there are. It's understandable to a degree. I mean, you're talking about a region where names do change on a fairly regular basis, where dictatorial regimes are replaced one by another. I'm not going to rule out a racist approach here. I think if South Africa had been a case of minority black population ruling a majority white population, it would have ended much earlier. I think if AIDS had happened in Europe, God forbid, instead of Africa, we would have found a cure by now. So
But there's also another double standard that we can't miss here, that whatever country the United States is in, there's riots and protests. Why are you in this country? Whatever country the United States is not in, there are riots and protests. Why are you not in this country? The problem is to solve a number of issues that are plaguing Africa, we say, well, we've got to send more money. We send them to the dictators. We realize there's corruption. Nothing happens. But then if you send the NGOs right there on the ground to deal with the local economies, you're accused of trying to turn them to your Western standards, bring in values that aren't their values. You're supplanting the local economy. The problem is you can't win. And I think there's fatigue in that people, they just don't want to look anymore because they realize, I don't want to get my hearts involved in this because whatever I want to do to intervene seems like it's destined to fail. I know it's a fatalist, nihilist approach. I don't necessarily hold that, but I see why many folks do.
There's a lot to look. In Nigeria, the government is corrupt at a purely practical financial level and morally too. They know, as much as they dislike the terrorists in the north of the country, it's a majority Christian country, 54%, they know that if there is violence and slaughter in the north, Western governments will pump money into the Nigerian government. It's a corrupt government. They're not funding their military properly. The military is often outgunned by the rebels. So I want to move on because I think that's a sensible discussion of this. Too many people want to use hyperbole immediately. The Pope. Now, I was...
To move into nonsensible discussion?
Well, exactly.
Is that the segue?
Really, I was incredulous. He sounded to me, and
I'm
here comes the hate. He sounded like a suburban, semi-educated fool who was speaking out because he had a microphone. And because he's revered, no one would say, excuse me, Holy Father, what you said was just infantile.
I was astonished at the level of the discourse of him talking about, if Philip over here, if I punched his wife, or if
he insulted my mother, I'd give him a punch.
Something like that. Well, that's a conversation that I never expected a pope to have.
I agree with you.
I've seen other popes, and for me, maybe he became more of a people's pope.
He's trying to.
He's trying to, but this is ridiculous. You go to Philippines, we have a problem. There's an insurgency. There is the harshness of the Sharia in the southern Philippines is there, and you expect the Pope to speak the truth.
Look, he's trying to be folksy, and he thinks by talking about a punch, about an insult...
This is a lie. This is...
Well, it's silly, but far more significant than that. And I'm going to take a break before I hear from the libertarian here, but far more significant than that was when the Pope effectively said, you can't offend religion.
Yes.
What he said was, yeah, I believe that freedom of speech is a fundamental human right. However, it's always the rule of the caveat or the parenthesis. However, you really shouldn't offend religion. Really?
I think the whole movement of the 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th century was to revolt against religion in a religious way, but it was a revolt against Catholicism in some way.
I thought he put himself in a very dark and deep place, and this would be revolutionary. I would love it if the Pope, if the Pontiff could come forward and say, I was wrong. I misspoke, I was wrong. And I'm going to go to a break because I want to keep it in suspense. So when we come back, what does Anthony Furey think about this? We've no idea. Don't go away. Welcome back to Matters Papal. We're in suspense. We want to hear what Anthony Furey, who's a bit of a heretic, I think he might even be an atheist, so he's going to burn in hell. It doesn't matter what he says about the Pope's, I think, rather crass comments on that plane with a microphone about freedom of speech. Well, what he really said was there is no freedom. He said, say things as long as they don't offend. If they offend religious people, don't say them.
Well, I'm going to double down on the fact that I'd rather laugh with the sinners than cry with the saints here, Michael, because I think this is business as usual for this Pope. As soon as the conclave, God speaking through them, selected this Jesuit from this socialist Latin American country, I thought this is not going to end well. And let me tell you, when you sign onto your Facebook page and the folks, your anti-Catholic, left-wing, LGBT activist friends are the ones going, I love this guy. Well, you know that he is not following the normal suit of what the Catholic Church is. I mean, Joseph Ratzinger, I did not agree with him, but I respected him. And with a Pope, do you want to be liked or do you want to be respected by the world, by the folks who are not Catholics? And I think, what we're seeing here is unfortunately business as usual for a Pope that is doing this sort of touchy-feely Jesuit moral relativism. And I'm worried for what this means for the world, and I'm worried for my Catholic friends, because I think if you're going to be Catholic, be it with balls, and I don't think the Pope resembles this.
Tarek, pontifical emasculation.
Papal balls.
Look, I got educated in a Catholic school, so I have my preferences.
Me too.
But my point is that this Pope, I'm one of those people who were excited when
me too.
he was, because he brought the papacy down to really the level where most Catholics are working class, in the third world, who suffer quite a lot, and if they're practicing, they're mocked. There's a lot of things going bad for Catholics in the third world. And when he relates to ordinary people rather than the elites, I could relate to him. But
well, they're going to need a new Vatican code then, because the Vatican's about the elites. You know, it's not Martin Luther's church. It's not a Lutheran church.
He's got
and Martin Luther wanted to slaughter the peasants during the Peasants' War, so that's not about elitism.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, please. Oh, come on.
No, I think this Pope has been extremely exciting in what he has said about being inclusive and trying to be more loving than legalistic and so on. But in this case, I think what the problem is, he has a microphone. He's not treated as a real person. If he uses public transport, my golly, he used public transport. Right. I mean, let's be serious here. But he has a microphone. No one's going to challenge him. And he is spontaneous. He doesn't think through. Forgive me, I know I'll be attacked, but I don't see the great intellectual people claim. I think the last Pope was. I don't see this in France.
I never thought of him as an intellectual. I thought of him as a populist who ordinary Catholics would relate to in a far more manner than his.
Well, is he right? Should we not offend religious sensibility?
I think from a Pope's perspective, I think we must, because the whole history of the papacy is how it started crushing any opposition that came to the royalty that ruled with the sanction.
Nothing is more frustrating than this new trend of leaders of the Catholic Church or any church saying, oh, we have to respect all religions and treat them equally. No, religions are morally exclusive. If you want to be a good salesman for your religion, you better put the pitch for your religion down there. And I feel like he was doing this sort of multi-faith dialogue, touchy-feely thing. It's like, oh, you cannot insult all religions. I mean, he should be out there saying, oh, well, too bad, deal with it, because we don't take the cartoons sacredly, and I'm not a Muslim. I almost thought maybe he was thinking, the Ummah's not looking too bad these days.
If he had said that, he would have emerged with far more respect towards him if he had said, well, those laws are for Muslims, and I support if Muslims follow that law. But why am I supposed to follow somebody else's law?
Exactly.
It is so simple.
Now, the fundamental problem, if not the fundamentalist problem, is that the Pope, in Catholic thought being the direct successor to St. Peter and speaking on matters theological, has become a world politician. And so every issue, many politicians would know enough to not comment, but he will comment on things he doesn't really understand. And he's commented on this, and I think what he said is deeply dangerous. Let's move on a little about the terrorist campaign in general. It is not going to stop. There'll be more police attempts to prevent acts of terrorism. But do you think in Canada we are going to face something quite serious?
I think we already are, but the only thing working for us is that the thinking from the point of view of the terrorist, why would I do anything in Canada when I can safely stay here and wait as a sleeper cell till I get directions of what I have to do in the United States? I won't blow my cover. That is why I think the Toronto 18 was an amateur mistake. The professionals are here. I get a feeling they're everywhere. When anybody speaks in a first-person plural, you know that he's speaking for a group, and some people have started speaking that way. But it's not going to happen here. The naive white or black convert might do something. But those who are committed to destroying Western civilization as such and have an anti-American agenda, why would they operate from Canada?
Yeah, I do think there's definite levels, and I'm almost more worried about the ones who I haven't heard of than the ones I have. Newt Gingrich in the Wall Street Journal the other day said we need a strategy at the congressional level to deal with the international jihadist movement, as Stephen Harper put it. In my column in the Saturday Sun papers, I'm saying Canada's got to get with the program too, and we got to convene the committee and sit down and say, Harper said we're at war with the international jihadist movement. You need a strategy if you're in war.
But today, I think David Cameron was bullied by Obama to not repeat what he said on the aircraft, when he released a YouTube video saying we are at war with Islamist terrorism. But at the White House, he demurred a little bit and didn't use the same words, which means the Americans are pushing their policy, which says do not hurt the sentiments of our Muslim allies.
You know, I've just come back from doing some work in Florida for a few days and watching American TV, all the stations. It is quite painful watching White House representatives trying to wiggle out of refusing to use the word Islamist. They use terrorism.
Yes.
Terrorists, we'll use that now. But they're being mocked even by the left.
I know.
And the thing with the Islamist term, it does not mean all Muslims.
Of course.
It clearly means Muslims who have, so whatever you want to call it, radical, extreme, jihadi.
we're using
people
it for,
just
as
use the
politics.
word. I mean, it's pretty clear. Any sort of radical political agenda to, make virulent Islam the law of the land. It's not railroading all Muslims. So you can be an inclusive kumbaya guy and say Islamism.
Here's the point: the term Islamist and Islamism is a creation of Muslims. This was first identified by the Muslim Brotherhood, al-Islamiyya, which is Islamism. It was used by Dr. Muhammad Iqbal, the national poet of Pakistan, as well as India. He talked about 2 or 3 things: Arab imperialism, which nobody uses anymore, and Islamism. And the agents of Islamism that he said hell-bent on holding back an entire people from modernity.
All right. Furey and Fatah.
At your service.
That wasn't bad at all. 7 out of 10, could do better, but rather good. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And let us know what you think about this, and the Rumble, and me, and life in general. Email thearena@sunmedia.ca. You can find me on Twitter @Michael Coran, and don't you dare go anywhere, because we're going to come right back.